girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, listeners, welcome back to another week of the Hey Girl podcast. And we're going to start this one out right out the gate with true confessions. True confessions are that this episode is something that I have dreamed of, that I've planned for, and just always imagined that one day I would get to sit with Andy Needham and do a marriage podcast. Okay. But the confession part is I actually didn't really plan very well for this. And part of the reason why we're going to do a marriage podcast today is because I am really far behind in podcast stuff. And there was nothing ready to go live. But listen, I just want to say, Andy Needham, you are not my last resort.
I got the message loud and clear. No, just kidding.
No, really, I want to think that the Holy Spirit intervened, and okay. I would like to really spiritualize my procrastination. Is there somebody?
This ties right into our marriage.
Okay, so here's the deal. Today's episode, I have my husband, Andy, aka producer, aka my favorite human, in case you're wondering. And we're going to talk a little bit just about some marriage stuff. Wah, wah. Just kidding.
I don't even know what noise that was. Is that a loser buzzer or something sensual? I have no idea. I mean,
it really could go for either. So that's that's what keeps them in the show, is they don't know where we're going with this, and hopefully
neither do I.
So, okay. I have written down a couple of things I'd love to talk about with you, get your perspective. Let's see if our perspectives align, and if we could potentially need marriage counseling after this episode. It could happen. We have been married, it'll be 17 years this November, which, since we're 25, is like most of our lives. So we've also been together 19 years, because we dated for 2 years. It has not always been easy.
What?
I know. For me.
Wait a minute. Is this an intervention?
Yes. I actually brought you on here for witnesses. So here's the thing. When I think back to early on in marriage, I know for myself, I feel like a completely different person today than I was all those years ago when I was 18, newly married. Just a lot has changed. So I want to ask you get to start with this one. If you could go back and say something to your newlywed self, knowing all that you know now, what would you say to that young man?
Learn how to shave. No, that's good.
You will grow a beard someday.
And well, most of a beard.
It's okay.
It's fine.
Babyface Needham.
So I would say I have two things for this. The first thing I would tell my younger self is chill out.
That's what I would tell your younger self.
I think it probably is, because I feel like I was like high strung, like fight over what drawer the ladle goes in. I mean, probably bringing back some flashbacks in your mind right now.
Got a little PTSD.
Yeah. And I feel like I mean, God has done his sanctifying work in my life, but that would be one of the things I would tell myself. That'd be the first thing. Chill out.
He's at least gotten a real good start.
That's right. Oh, okay. What are you talking about? And then the second thing I would tell my younger self, which is going to sound super cliche, but I would tell my younger self, it gets better. Because I think the thing, and this is true in like a lot of adolescence, in early 20 life, in every sort of milestone, There's no book, premarital counseling, advice, or anything that can give you perspective, because when you have your first fight, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit as we get into it, you have no context for that. So you don't know how deep a valley is, how high a mountain is. Like, it's so hard to put things into context. And I feel like 17 years later, we still walk through a lot of hard things and we have plenty of messy moments, but there is a framework of grace and a framework of failure and a framework of redemption that you get to put that in. So those would be the things I would tell myself. So
I like that. I think my advice to myself, the first one would be the same, the chill out. And for me, though in some ways it probably showed up differently, I would just say I felt like everything was worth fighting over. That, like, if I didn't stand my ground, it's almost like I felt like I was fighting to keep my own identity for that first while. Some of that might have been that I was only 18 and trying to figure out who I was.
Yeah, I think.
But like, yeah. But like anything that we disagreed on, I almost like I was ready to go to the mat over it because my opinion mattered, darn it. Like, whatever it was. The other thing I would actually tell myself is that the secret to marriage was not, and still is not, figuring out how not to ever fight. But there is something to be said about learning how to fight well.
And fight fair.
And fight fair, yes. Because I very distinctly remember early on in our marriage being devastated when we started fighting, because for whatever reason, when we dated, we never fought. And I also didn't grow up in a home where I witnessed that between my mom and dad, like a lot of fighting. And so when that started in our marriage, I legitimately went to the extreme of like, oh my goodness, this marriage is doomed because we can't seem to not fight. And granted, early on, we did not fight well, but I was so determined at times, and actually began to impact my own health, to try and keep us from fighting at all, rather than learning how to have like healthy conflict. And I would tell my younger self to stop worrying about trying to avoid fighting and instead learn how to have healthy conflict. And because that to me has been a huge game changer in our marriage that, let's be real, only came through some pretty intense marriage counseling.
Well, you may remember even some of these conversations, but one of the things interesting, like, and I feel like I had a great upbringing in the faith and understood the gospel, and there's a lot of grace, and not that it was perfect childhood, but I think it was in marriage really that I learned the actual practice of repentance and forgiveness. And like, so not just I'm sorry, or not just like it's over with, but really like, hey, this is what I did, and I know that it hurt you, and I want to ask for your forgiveness for that, and also being willing to extend that even when you didn't feel like things were all better yet. So that was a big thing, and that was partially through some great counsel and counselors that we had.
Absolutely. Talking about, and I kind of alluded to it, but in terms of my own health. But one of the things I've been pretty open about on this podcast, in conversation, when I speak pretty much everywhere, is that mental health is something that I have wrestled with, that we have faced in our family. And I've talked about it from kind of a personal side. I've even alluded a little to it in terms of walking through it as a mom. But what would you say that you have learned, that we have learned, in how to walk that road when you add into marriage, which already has, a lot of dynamics and things to figure out, but you add into that mental illness?
Well, some of it ties into what I said, and it gets better in terms of context, because again, being young and married and having your spouse, and it could go either direction. It could be, for other people, there could be the husband that's depressed, or the wife, whatever it is. It could be a friend, but you don't have a framework for even the ebbs and the flow of it. So if it seems like a downward spiral, you're like, how far down is this going? Like, is this ever going to come back up? And and you never, I mean, I would say we still don't have a sense of like imperfect rhythm, but we have learned, the seasonality of certain things and other things. So there's a context there. I think the other thing is, for me, just the way I'm wired, and this is true of like my work life, it's one of the things that God's wired into me, but I want to fix problems, right? So I want to bring solutions. And there is a place where we have been able to have really great conversations about things that are I would say ingredients to health or things that contribute, but none of them are a silver bullet. And also like how and when those conversations happen is another thing, rather than trying to be Mr. Fix-It or try to bring the remedy immediately. I have, learned, the best way to love you in that, I guess. I don't know. I mean, and it's not perfect either, because it's not like there's like, okay, now I have this all figured out. And I think the thing that I've appreciated for you is just that you have not been unwilling to try different things to help you in that area. But again, knowing that there's no singular solution. So I don't know if is that helpful?
Yeah. And I would say this is definitely something that we've grown in together. And this is an area for sure that I think you learn a lot about grace from someone who wrestles with or can have a hard time with mental illness. It can be really easy to want you to show up perfectly, but the irony in that is oftentimes I don't even know what I need or what I want. And so ultimately you're from the get-go set up for failure there, because I don't know what I want you to do. But it can be really hard if you're in fix-it mode and I'm just in, spiral mode. But how to have grace for one another in that, for me to allow you to have moments and not flip out or equate your desire to fix it as in like you don't care or you're being insensitive or whatever it is. And the other side for me, I've learned that I need to communicate even when I don't feel like communicating, because this is such a horrible when you say it out loud, but I think there's that temptation to feel like you should know what I want. I shouldn't have to tell you. And it's just not fair to you. And it's one of those things, almost like unspoken expectation. And that can be anything from communicating to you, hey, I am just not in a good place right now and I just need grace. Sometimes it can just be, hey, I'm going to try a couple of things. Would you be willing? Like I think I've mentioned this before, but you're supportive of me when I've been like, I want to get a gym membership, or I'm going to try tanning, or hey, I'm going to go see this therapist and we're talking about medication. All of these things, to continue to communicate through that is a really big deal. And I think you've done incredible, I would say, in terms of your patience with me in it. Because I do remember early on, and I think both of us wrestled with this, the instant, like, we just got to make this better. And you've actually taught me a lot in terms of that balance of it's okay to not be okay, but hey, what can we do to kind of move you towards being okay? Because I tend to be an all or nothing person, and that's not your bent. And so you've helped me kind of find that middle ground of, hey, why don't you lay down for an hour? But then after that, why don't we get up and we'll do something? We'll take the dog for a walk or whatever it is.
I was going to say one other thing that I think is important is I've also learned to communicate to you, because I think it's hard if one person, and this is probably true even outside of marriage, but if one person in a relationship is in a hard spot, whatever, if it's a struggle they brought on themselves, if it's something like mental illness they don't have control over, whatever it is, to make it a singular situation. And what I mean by that is, I think there were times early on when I didn't feel I had any space or permission to kind of say, you know what, every February and March, I have a hard time. Like, I don't necessarily wouldn't call it depression. It might be like a seasonal a little bit, but I mean, probably everyone in New England resonates with me right now, but we've been able to talk through that and kind of have permission to be like, we're not competing in dysfunction here. Like, it's not like, oh, my dysfunction doesn't even on the Richter scale of what you're going through. So anyway, that's something that comes to mind.
That's a good point, because I was thinking as you were talking about the temptation to compete in exhaustion, dysfunction, overwhelmingness. Like, I think we've actually had this conversation before, because this is not something we've always done perfectly. When you are exhausted or you don't feel good and your spouse is kind of in that same place, maybe for different reasons, what does it look like to actually support each other in that and not be like, okay, but I did this, and this, or don't feel appreciated for all the work that you've done. And I would just say a lot of that is awareness and intentionality. And sometimes it's tag teaming, like, hey, we're both tired, we're both having a hard time. Sometimes I feel like we do this really well, even it just kind of flows maybe from being married as long as we have, where you'll take care of dinner and I'll kind of rest or something, and then I'll be cleaning up from dinner and working with the kids, and then you can go lay down, and instead of, you know, coming down hard on each other, like, what are you doing? Just kind of supporting each other's needs to rest and working together on that instead of against each other, instead of in competition. Tell me something. I think one of the hardest things for me to learn in marriage, I don't even know if that's probably extreme to say, but I married into full-time ministry, as in you were already working in full-time ministry. We worked at a camp. There was a lot of being on platform in front of people because of the nature of the ministry that we did. It was like a lot of people, we met a lot of people throughout the year, or people just saw us doing what we did at the camp. And how do we balance this, like our marriage, and which there's a lot when you're wrestling, you're struggling in your marriage or whatever it is, and this kind of on platform persona, what people think of you, and kind of walking that line.
Well, I think what you're driving at a little bit is this sense of like when you have a platform, or if you have influence, or you're in leadership, and that could look like whatever, and I don't want to overstate it, like there's like our millions of fans or anything like that. It's not, I mean, now that you have a podcast, I mean, obviously, but
well, even if like 10 people, if you're a teacher in front of a classroom.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you, and this is just the attention of leadership, is how do you live authentically in that space, though there are certain things that you're not going to share with everyone. So reconciling that in the times when things are not going well at home or in your own personal life or with your walk with Jesus. And I'm not talking about like moral failures that will derail you, but I'm talking about just, you know, the normal dysfunction and brokenness that we have. So I think we wrestle with that a lot. And I feel like God has moved us miles and miles in that. And as we think about this question, the thing that I feel like where we've come to is someone needs to know everything and everyone should know something. And so what I mean by that is there are people, even with some of the challenges that we're facing in life right now, that know everything. Like there's no secrets.
Right.
And at the same time, and I think this one thing that has endeared people about like Hey Girl and the way we try to live our ministry is that, you know, we are okay with saying like, hey, there's things that are going on right now. And sometimes we share even details of that, depending on how, if it's our struggle or someone else's, or, you know, what freedom we have in that, because we don't want to betray, you know, a friend or, you know, so but I think that it's okay as a leader there's ways, and it's not easy and it's not perfect. And I don't say we do it perfectly at all, but there are ways to be authentic about the fact that you're not in a perfect spot. And I think that, you know, as God has grown us, he's allowed that to be something that he really has like used as part of the way that he reveals his grace through our story. So.
And I think probably the root of where I've really struggled with it along the way is coming to understand that authenticity isn't everything bare before you, it's not if I haven't told you everything, then I haven't really been honest with you. I don't remember where I heard it, but somebody talked about how this idea of learning modesty within our authenticity, like what does it look like, kind of like honestly the way that we dress, and we don't walk around, or shouldn't, showing everything. And there's a lot of that like in our own lives, having that discernment of who needs to know what. And I love that line, you know, just somebody needs to know everything. And that's been something that has been true since early on in our marriage, because we have wrestled with some pretty difficult things, and even just for the survival of our marriage, we realized we need people that know our junk, for like lack of a better term. They know our junk, they know what's going on, because one, for accountability, and two, we do need people encouraging us and praying for us and checking in on us. And so, no, I appreciate that.
I'd also say that, like, the other thing, the reason that's important is because even though our brokenness and our authenticity is obviously a pathway for people to see the grace of God, we don't want our brokenness to be the center of our story. Like, that's not the whole story. That's not what defines us as Christians. So if we wear that in, I mean, the other extreme is to wear that so out in the open that, I mean, it's like we're just crying for attention, or might feel that way to people. So I think, like, sometimes there's been times when I've had to step up and lead worship in front of a group of people, knowing that we weren't necessarily at that moment at the sweet spot of our relationship. But that was also the work of service that God had put before me. And he wanted me to serve in my brokenness, and to not make my brokenness the fullness of my story, to go and serve those people and do the work, because God also wired us to work. And so that's, I don't know, I just think that those things are connected to each other. So I think, we are in a generation that values authenticity as a high value, which I think is a beautiful thing within the church. But we need to, and I think you've even said it on recent podcasts, but we have to be careful that we don't become defined by our brokenness to ourselves in our marriage or in our platform, whatever that, or influence that, whatever that might look like.
Absolutely. Preach. Okay, so we're talking a lot about brokenness. So here's a question for you, and I don't know what your answer is, but when you think about our marriage, 16 and a half, whatever it is, years, what do you feel like, maybe you can pick one, or if you have a handful.
That was our dog, not me.
That was a really wonderful sound. When you think about your biggest mistake in terms of in our marriage, what comes to mind?
That's a tough question. I mean, I have a very long list.
I was like, want some suggestions? No, I'm just kidding.
What do you say is my biggest mistake?
The dangerous way to ask that is, what do you think my biggest mistake in our marriage is? Asking this question.
So I think the thing that I feel the most, I mean, I feel freedom and grace because God has sanctified my life in a way that I feel like I am not owned by this in any regard, but that I look back on and kind of have, I would say regret might be the wrong word, but remorse over, is the way that as a younger husband, the way that anger owned my heart, and at times in our conflict overflowed to the point of like putting your physical well-being at risk. Like, that's something that, I mean, there are moments that are fixed in my memory that I put at the cross daily, but I just think about, and I'm like, I'm so grateful for the grace of friends and counselors and people in my own life, and for you, and the way that I don't feel captive to that any longer. But that would be just a real earnest reality of like, I think anger was exposed in my heart in a way through marriage that I didn't realize it was there. And in some ways you bore the brunt of that revelation of a dysfunction at a time when it wasn't dealt with in a good or godly way. So
Yeah, and I think I'd probably tie my own to that because, and we've said this before, those early years of marriage were rough, real rough. And I definitely remember moments where I was, pretty convinced that our marriage was not going to last. Like, I didn't know when or how it would end. In fact, it's what made finding out that I was pregnant at 19 so devastating, was partially because I was 19 and pregnant, but partially because our marriage was in such a volatile place that my mind immediately went to, not only am I going to be divorced, but now 19, I got to figure out how to raise a baby on my own. Like, it was just a lot. And I would say when I look back, some of the biggest mistakes are the things that, I don't know if it's regrets or I love your, like, things I have to continue to surrender at the foot of the cross, is how often I would throw those things back at you and use them, because it's one of those things where I could say that I forgave you, but just in the own, like, you know, later years, whatever it is, the bitterness in my heart or having not fully worked through them, I would almost keep them in this secret chest that if we got into a fight, it was almost like I had the trump card every time. Like, okay, so maybe I'm not the best wife, but let's not forget what you were early on in our marriage. And I laugh about it now, but I just think it makes me feel sick inside, because I think it's the opposite of living how Christ would live in terms of true forgiveness and actually surrendering. And I don't even have like a marked moment that I feel like that shifted for me, but I definitely, over time, God kind of worked that, I would say probably through when I finally entered personal counseling, helped me kind of work through some of those things that I thought that I had worked through, but really had kind of just stuffed down and managed to keep under the surface again until something would hit that nerve or something, and then I would immediately kind of lash back at you.
Well, one of the things that this ties into, and this is, you know, I just keep going with my own failures, but when Paul writes, you know, about love to the Corinthian church, one of the pieces of that, he says love is, and he lists off a number of things. Love is patient, love is kind. I think the one in marriage that for me has been the most like unlock something is love keeps no record of wrongs. Because I think I have a natural propensity to keep a record of wrongs. And so the way that shows up for me is like little micro, you didn't clean out the sink, you didn't do this. And so, I mean, you're probably having PTSD, just me kind of going through that right now. But, but there's times when I would let things build up, and what was happening is I was keeping a record of wrongs. And it's the same thing. And the thing is, like, for me, it happened in minutia, right? It happened in things that were like, you would be like, that's so insignificant. Why are you even keeping track? Why are you keeping score on that? For you, it might have been, you know, major issues or something like that. But ultimately, where grace leads us, where love leads us, is love keeps no record of wrongs. And so it's like we completely wipe the score chart clean by grace. And that's you know, that is a huge, I think we're there. Again, we fight for it. We do it imperfectly, but God has led us to a new place in that.
And it's a consistent surrender too, because, you know, we're looking early on in our marriage, but throughout our marriage, there have been moments where one of us, both of us have blown it big time and had to come in repentance and ask for forgiveness. And the easier thing and the natural thing would be to hold on to that, because somehow in our mind, we've convinced ourselves that, okay, but this one I'm allowed to hold on to because this is different than other things. And that call to know this also, by God's grace, I need to surrender. I think it's powerful, for sure. Okay, so let's get off the depressing marriage conversation.
Marriage is fun, don't you?
Yay! Marriage. No, but really, here's the thing that I would say, because you said it is cliche or whatever, that marriage gets better. But one of the things that I would say specifically marriage gets better is that I feel like we have more fun now in our marriage, these last whatever years, relaxed fun, I would even say authentic fun, not forced fun, than we have at all early on in our marriage. And I don't think it was a book we read or a conference we went to.
It definitely wasn't a book you read. So.
No comment.
You got better at reading. You read goodly.
I read. For the record, I actually read a lot, okay? In seasons.
Twitter. You don't even do Twitter.
I was like, that's not even accurate.
I don't even know.
It actually makes...
Show notes. You read a lot of show notes.
No, I don't even do that. Dare you to read my show notes. That'll show you. Okay, so getting me off track. All right, so here's the thing. It is more fun. We laugh consistently in our marriage with each other, at each other. And just, I don't know, there's a lot of things, but I do think that there has been an intentionality in investing in kind of healthy rhythms in our marriage to actually, well, really invest in just enjoying one another, enjoying our time. So what are some of those things for you, healthy rhythms that you feel like these are things that are things I definitely, or you would not want to give up?
Well, I'll start by getting on my high horse a little bit here because I have a little mantra about this, which is there is always this talk in ministry circles, even in marriage conferences, like we just need to find balance. If we get I just need to find some more, like things are out of balance. I need to find some balance. And what I think found a lot of freedom in, and I think we practice this like very well, is that we're not chasing balance. Like we are not chasing balance because balance is a unicorn. It does not exist.
We chased her right out the room.
Mercy will be disappointed when I say unicorns don't exist, but balance is a myth. It is. And so the way that we talk about it is rhythm. And rhythm, for some people, and this is where personalities of relationship and individuals come into play. So it's like, I don't want to be very prescriptive in this because I'll be descriptive about what works for us in this. But I think as a couple and as a person, you need to figure out what are the rhythm. And there's certain things God gave us, like Sabbath, and he gave us seasons, and he gave us, even in our calendars, we have holidays and different things that we can use. But there are some things for us in that. So like on a weekly basis, and we have never honestly, like, I'd love to be like, we do date nights every Tuesday night. That'd be a lie.
Who have you been dating on Tuesday nights?
I don't know. That's not how it really rolls for us. But I do think that we are very good at this point in our life of making sure that if we have time, we capitalize on it, and secondarily that we don't let time go by without intention. We have forced by because our schedules with 2 teenagers in the house are so complex that we will fight for time to say, hey, let's talk about our schedule, let's talk about, or just grab. And sometimes it's even crazy things like our son goes to school 30 minutes away and you'll get home after a long day of work and I've been pounding it at the office, and we're like, hey, let's just go pick him up together, we'll just ride down there, so we have 30 minutes of time together. So that's in the small things. Is there anything you want to say about sort of like the weekly or monthly, just the normal stuff?
I would say rhythms change as life goes too, because we joke about we don't have every Tuesday night, but we used to when our kids were little, and we had, I feel like little kids actually they are healthiest within pretty solid routines. So when we lived at Monadnock, you actually worked a job where you were out of the office during the week at like 5 o'clock. Our kids were in bed by 7. So was it Wednesday nights? Every Wednesday night we joined the adult volleyball league.
Yeah.
And that was our date. We had somebody come over to our house. Our kids were in bed and we went out for the night and we played volleyball together. And that was weekly date night. And it worked during that time. But yeah, right now with 2 teenagers, I'm working full time. You're working full time. Life is full. It would be so easy to be like, okay, the other thing you say, you hate the thing balance. I rub against, my thing is, don't say when things settle down, because
yeah, it's just a season and things are going to settle down.
Yeah. When we get to whatever, you got to figure it out where you are. And the thing I really like about our right now is the little things, they almost become kind of special. So for us, it's watching shows in bed. We have you just got the little Amazon Fire thing, watching a show together. We oftentimes, if our kids, actually we did it tonight, this is a good example. Our kids are out at youth group. So we brought in takeout. What do you, shh, don't tell our kids. But we enjoy, we'll get food, bring it to the house, hang out, whatever it is, just finding those little moments. And yeah, car rides, we've done hey, let's just go grab a cup of coffee together, but being really intentional with it. in fighting for it, because it would be so easy, even tonight with our kids out of the house. We're sitting here. There's a million things that I could be doing, should be doing, cleaning my house right now. But, you know, making this time be like, you know what? Kids are out of the house. Let's hang out and do a podcast.
Why not? So on the macro, and I think this really started when I was traveling with the band. I feel like it was part of it because at that point, like, rhythm was crazy. And so we knew, like, okay, Dad's going to be gone for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes like a lot of weeks, that we would make sure that there was sacred time on the calendar down the road. So it could have been a vacation with the kids, but we also, and I think it was about our 10-year anniversary, so 7 years ago, we said, you know, we're going to start making sure, and the way that we describe it is, we want to know on our calendars, we should be able to tell you when the next time we're getting away together is. And right now, like, I could probably say 2 times, which is kind of cool. But if you know, you can have that conversation of like, this is just a season, when you define when the end of that season is.
This is true.
So if you define that, okay, we know every fall is conference season and it's crazy and we have all this stuff going on, but because of that, we're going to carve out this weekend or this week or these set of days, and we're going to say those are blocked off. And it could be that we stay home, or it might be that we do a project, or it might be, and we've been able to, you know, by God's grace, do some cool stuff. We go on a trip somewhere and we get away, or, you know, for a night or a weekend or whatever. And frankly, I love planning that stuff. I nerd out on it. So I have fun, even just planning it.
Yeah. And I love that, the idea of having something on your calendar. And I think one of the things I've appreciated about you is, I think back over the last few years, is all the different types of things we've done that have been affected by how much time we had, our budget. Like, there have been times when we've been able to do things awesome because we had money and savings, and then there were times where we're like, we have a $0 budget, what can we do? And we figured it out and done things together. But the things that were important were, we did things without our kids.
Yes, and that's a big one, which
Yes.
I would say we set the roots for that early in our marriage, too. Not that we were able to afford to do dilly squat then, but we went away without our kids occasionally.
Just left them at home.
No.
But we have taken time. And I think I was telling somebody the other day that part of our rhythm has actually become, we do one big trip with our kids every year. It's like family vacation. And then we do one that's just you and I. And it's actually been, the last few years, the same length of time. It's a week away with the kids and then a week away just mom and dad. And it's been just to me, our marriage, so good for our marriage. And also for both of our mental health when we're going through these crazy seasons. Because people ask sometimes, like, how do you do all these things all at once? Sometimes I want to be like, some of it is just knowing that on the other side of this, like, we really do rest. What is it? Work hard, play hard, like
rest well.
Yeah, rest well. And for us, it's just been that intentionality to rest well together, like taking that time together.
Well, I just want to say one thing about, and this is, again, sort of a soapbox moment, but with going away without your kids, because it's harder the longer you wait to do it. And again, there's no shame if that's where you're at. And there might be reasons, like there could be other situations that make that prohibitive. So I don't want to speak shame over anyone's situation. But the thing that we have continually said, even at times, though our kids have been weepy messes when we've left, or, you know, angsty teens when we left, or whatever phase of life we were in, is we keep telling them, and this is 100% the truth, is that the greatest gift we can give you as mom and dad is a healthy marriage. Aside from, you know, surrounding you with faith and grace and showing you who Jesus is, the way we're going to model that in our home is by having a marriage that's centered on Christ and that is filled with grace. And so that has been something that we tell our kids all the time. And, you know, I think one of the things that was really hard when we moved down, like, because our first season of marriage was sort of in a Christian bubble, and then we moved to suburbia, and there's a lot to that. But when I became youth pastor, I was watching this pattern of, I walk kids through high school, I'd go to their graduation party, the house would go on the market, and mom and dad would split up. And I saw that happen more times than I even care to share. And there's always reasons, but what it kind of just drilled into my head is like, you know what? I want to make sure that we are laying deep roots into our marriage, because parenting will be for life, but marriage is going to be the primary relationship we're going to be together. And so that is a huge thing when we want to give that gift to our children. So that's a big thing.
Parenting is relationship for life, but marriage is roomies for life.
That's true. Yes. And then the thing, I just want to say a few things about like what we've learned and again, this is very much like what has worked for us, and it's not prescriptive by any regard, but we have found a few things that we really enjoy, that we both enjoy, and it's hard, and that what we do probably wouldn't work for a lot of people. But on our 10-year anniversary, we went on a cruise, and for me, because I'm so much of my life is scheduled and planned and traveling and figuring out the next thing, and I'm also always concerned about our budget and all those kind of things, and I'm on my phone all the time. It was like the trifecta of, this is a place that I can go and unplug. I don't look at menu prices. I put the phone in the safe, and you can testify that like we unplug. We go off grid. We don't do the Wi-Fi. We don't bring our phones onto the islands or whatever. And
we've even stopped taking a lot of photos just because we're like, let's just be.
Yeah. And that's been a huge, great experience, as long as I'm the one who picks the excursions.
Okay, I made him jump off a few cliffs.
You have to tell the story a little bit, because I think this is a great Andy and Bethany story.
A great example.
This will make me look good and you look bad. No, just kidding.
Okay, so I'll try and keep this somewhat.
So for framework, often I plan soup to nuts the whole trip. Bethany, I'm her concierge.
I literally call him that.
Yeah, so she doesn't have to think about whatever, which is part of what I find joy in that. But one time we were going
I do as well, and you doing it.
So we were going to Jamaica, which is an island that we hadn't been to before, but we knew from doing some research that, hey, it's a good place for us to do an excursion, which we don't always pay for the excursion, but just for safety and to make sure we had a great day. So I was like, hey, Bethany, you can pick whatever you want. This will be the one thing that we spend money on in terms of when we go on an island. Do whatever you want and just tell me what it is, and I'll pick up. So Bethany says, hey, we're going to do this like lazy river, and there's a spot where like I can go jump off a cliff, and it's like and there's these pictures of this gorgeous water. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll do whatever. Okay.
So here's the situation. I am a bit of an adventurous. I love to do things. I keep a constantly, or basically a bucket list. It's just I'm always adding to. And one of the things that I added to as soon as I saw this excursion was cliff jumping over waterfalls in Jamaica. I was like, that sounds epic. And in my mind, I had pictured like me getting to do this, Andy getting to lay at the base of the waterfalls, like hanging out, doing what he does, read his books, whatever it is. And I'm just jumping off cliffs. Well, we took this bus way up, pretty far into Jamaica. And it was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But I began to feel alarm as we began to hike, that we were all hiking together up the side of these waterfalls. And probably about halfway up, it occurred to me that the jumping wasn't optional. That's how we got down. And you have to know Andy to know this was going to combine two things that were not his favorite things. Heights and swimming is not. You don't love the swimming. And sorry, I'm still picturing this.
So we get to the top, and it's just like, I'm not going to make a stink about it. I'm going to go with the program. I'm not like going to be but I just look at Bethany and I'm like, seriously, like, come on.
Actually, what he said is, you're never planning an excursion again.
So we jump, and honestly, it wasn't the first couple jumps, not too bad. And then the last one, pretty intense. And then they're like, oh, there's one more really, really high jump. It was like a 40-foot jump. And they're like, this one's optional. And all I had to hear the guy say was like, the person in front of us was like, he's like, make sure you jump to your left. And I'm like, wait a minute. I am not like a cliff jumping expert. I don't know if I have precision to land in the right spot. So I was like, I'm out. But of course, Bethany is like, she's got to say no, but you know.
I almost said no, but then that voice in my head that's like, you're always going to wonder. And so I just went for it.
Okay. So then fast forward, that's like part one of the day. They get us back in the vans. We drive down. And now I will say that I went back and read the excursion description afterwards, and at no point were the words lazy connected to the word river, but that was the description I was given, because it was like, we're gonna go float on this river like leisurely. And so we get on and we're getting out of the van, and they're like handing us like basically like SWAT gear. No, it was just a helmet, but it's just exaggerating. And so
I knew it was bad when they gave us the helmet.
So we get on this, and it's like, it's not, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it is again spectacularly beautiful. And then so Bethany's like, hey, you know, your phone is like water resistant. You should bring your phone with you to be able to take pictures of this. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, honey.
Because it'll be a lazy river.
And so we get in, and there's like one guide, and he's like, make sure you grab the ropes. And so there's like ropes that are stretched across the river, which is not lazy, and it is moving very fast. And you grab onto the rope, and then they have to like move you through different parts. And I mean, it was really fun. Like, honestly, I didn't mind that part of it, except for the what ended up happening, which probably is better to describe from your perspective.
Okay, well, two things I need you to know is the description that drew me to this was, and okay, I will admit
epic death trap.
They didn't say lazy river, but they described it as like you're in these tubes going down this beautiful river. What was it, like these the bamboo on the side? It was just absolutely breathtaking. And they talk about like they are serving drinks along the way. Like in my mind, I'm picturing these like little bamboo huts where you float up and you can order a drink or something and then float on by. This is what's in my mind. When in reality, we get in these tubes, we get to the first rope, which the guide is very clear. When you get to the first rope, hold on until I get there, because I got to get everybody in the water. But the problem is you're holding this rope while water is pulling your tube forward. And so we started losing people from our group immediately. They were getting bumped past the rope. And so the first thing that went wrong is my romantic trip down the river. We weren't even together. You couldn't control where your tube was going to go. So Andy was one of those tubes that got bumped ahead of everyone else. So they're all pretty far ahead, and I'm still towards the back with the guide. And I hear there definitely was commotion, and I can't remember whether it was
there was commotion.
So it's like, man down. And I don't know why I kind of knew in the moment. I was like, oh no, probably because how the cliff jumping went. And I tried to look down the river, and then the guide who was kind of hanging with me in the back was like, ooh, I think that your man. Sure enough, Andy entered these rapids with these other tubes, and I want to say you were trying to be a gentleman.
No, it honestly, it was just, it was fine. Whatever. I flipped over, and
so did his phone.
My phone, I would share pictures of it, but that was the last time my phone ever lived. So
can I just say too that I feel like it was misrepresented, because there were no bamboo huts. There were very loud Jamaican men throwing Dixie cups punch at you as you were flying down the river. So we should find the name of it in case it was in Jamaica.
It's Blue Hole.
It's Blue Hole. Go check out Blue Hole. It's a rush.
Blue Hole of Death.
Also, if you find an iPhone 8, can you pick it up for us?
That's right. So are we done with this story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I figure we probably should wrap the episode because it's getting long, which it's nice because I can make sure you don't go an hour and 15 minutes. And I have to edit it later. But I have, because we got Chinese food, I got our fortune cookies. So I figured we could reveal our fortunes on the podcast.
Reveal
I don't know how this is going to go. It could be very
Are
inappropriate.
we revealing the fortune how we read the fortune?
People can make up whatever, social norms they have about what we're saying, but we're just going to read them. We're not going to add
I can't.
You can add commentary. You just can't add the any
I can't
additional
tell them?
words. No.
Oh, okay. Wait, what? Okay.
What does your fortune say?
I have to say it because it's only funny if okay. Okay, here.
I still have a ministry job. I like to remind everybody.
Okay, but it's fine, guys. And this is a marriage talk. So,
Single people, you can turn off the podcast now.
So I don't know if you've noticed, but the fortune cookie fortunes have gotten lame. So if you want to spice up your fortune cookie life, just add in bed to the end of every fortune. So therefore, my fortune is compliment 3 people every day in bed. Okay, your turn.
I feel like mine is lame after the woman of the night fortune. Pray for Bethany. Mine is education is the ability to meet life situations in bed. Education.
Oh, I love it. Well, you are a sport for coming on, talking marriage. We may do this again, but I will say, if you have any questions, we went all over the map in terms of, we did talk about some heavy stuff from our marriage, very light stuff, our fortune, cookies, all the things. But you can always reach out to us. We're both on social media. We will tell you what is appropriate to tell you and tell you to mind your own business if you ask too much. So thank you for tuning in. Anything you want to say before I say goodbye to them?
This morning we went to visit a church, and so it was hilarious because literally Bethany had like a line of women.
That is so not true.
It was like 4 or 5 people coming up to her, and like it was great. It was just amazing, and they were all Hey Girl listeners. So if you came to say hello to Bethany today up in New Hampshire, thanks for coming and saying hello. It was good to remind her that people listen to her podcast.
You all were very sweet. And for our listener who also listens with her daughter and took a photo with my daughter this weekend, you made her day. So listeners, I love you. You're amazing. Thanks for the messages.
I'll just say, because I'm the producer, that if you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be amazing. So leave the 5 stars, of course, and then just say something dumb that Bethany has said over the last 3 seasons. Just quote it right there. No, you don't have to do that, but just say something nice. So.
All right.
So much material.
Yeah. Stop. All right, listeners, go find yourself a fortune cookie and have fun with it. Bye.